Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Football Podcast, and I am your host, Adam Crowhurst, and with me, as usual, is Jack Colsheen. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Fantasy Football World Championship 11, and with me is Jack, who came in second place last year. I know it's still a sore subject. Got to get that number one spot this year. What's going on, Jack?
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I'm just doing pretty well. Just spent the last 6 hours reading injury reports. So,
oh, dude.
What a bloodbath.
What a bloodbath. It's like, you think you're comfy. Listen, at least there's not like 20,000 waivers we have to redo. You know what I mean? Like to go, like, oh, let's go pick up this. No, it doesn't matter now. Josh Palmer, if you don't have him, it's over. It's over already. So
I also feel like we can conclusively say that time travel doesn't exist, or it doesn't at this point, or even in the future, because there are no like Easton Stick, Quentin Johnston stacks in the tournament. Yeah, so, you know, you could have constructed the playoff team from the waiver wire solely at this point if you had that inside knowledge. So I think we're safe on time travel.
That's right. Biff Tannen didn't come back from the future
exactly
with his almanac and pick
right.
up.
Right. Exactly. The Minnesota Vikings QB4 or something like that.
Yeah, with the injury. So,
yep.
But yeah, we're gonna get into all that tonight, and so looking forward to it, man. It's been a long year, a fun year, a stressful year with the injuries and stuff. But here we are. We got some teams in the race here. The race for 150K. Also, there's there's the Circa Las Vegas Mid-Stakes tournament, which I know you have a bunch of teams in. I do as well. I think that's the race for 50K. I think is in that one. So it's a lot of money up for grabs here, and we're gonna hop into it tonight. So why don't you intro the World Championship? I know you came in second last year. I know you have experience with this. You've done a ton of teams. Talk to the people about. I mean, most people watching, already kind of know, but just talk to them about like, the payouts and the structure and maybe some of the differences between this tournament and like other similar tournaments.
Sure. So this is my favorite tournament that I play in. We started this year. It was sold out at 600 teams, and now we've culled that down to 204, which you think that the 4 sounds a little strange, but those are some wild card teams that get in on basically some safety valve rules that keep at least some deserving teams in. So you've got 204 teams remaining. There's 123 unique players across those. Yeah, that's right. 204 and 123 different players who at least have a team in that race. Now, my favorite part about it is that we're all playing for the big money. We're all after the $150,000 top prize. And while that's a smaller top prize overall, we've paid out 21 dominators in this league. So you've got 21 different teams taking home $10,000 at the league level, which gives that great ROI among your 12-person league, but still gives you a big prize to go after right now for these last 3 weeks. And for me, the best part about it is it's kind of the same any given Sunday sort of mentality of the NFL, because we've been working your way up the rankings or falling your way down the rankings all regular season. But now, because instead of having all of those points cumulatively, you come in with your average points per week and then the next 3 weeks. So right now, between number 1 and all the way down at number 204, there is just about 34 points that separate everybody. And that's just a good week or two.
That's
so
right.
Basic at this point, if you've made it in, you are live.
You're live.
And you've got a shot at that $150,000.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting. And again, shout out to the to Scott and everyone over at the FFWC and Ian, as far as like the payouts and stuff, like I love the Dominator. I think it really separates the FFWC from all these other sites about how like you said, the ROI to get that money within the league, because I know the prize goes from 150 to like maybe 25,000, which is a really big gap in between first and second overall. But a lot of that money is within the league, which is much easier to get than to come in the top two of the entire event. So I feel like we won a Dominator, and that pays for 6 or 7 leagues right there. So that was really cool. And yeah, no, it's an exciting time. We have a couple live teams, and so as we get started here, I want to pull up last year's this year's current main event FFWC Championship number 1 team going into it here. I'm going to pull off the banner here, but what as I do that, what position did it's Team Honeycutt? What position did Team Honeycutt draft from this year?
Steve Honeycutt and his number 1 regular season team, that was the 3rd position, drafting the 103.
Gotcha. So yeah,
he drafted that was August 22nd. So still pretty early on, especially if you look at the rest of the standings and you just kind of browse the top 10. There's a lot of early September, mid-September, and so seeing at the top one of the first, August 22nd, a little bit earlier on, it's good to see that he took advantage of some values here. Yeah,
for sure. So yeah, kind of showing this here. Let me see if I can get a different overlay for this while we do that. There we go. That's fancy. Perfect. So yeah, let's show some of this stuff here. And I'm definitely interested in this team. Team Honeycutt, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen. Now, listen, feeling great. Probably do we know if Honeycutt got a Dominator? I'm assuming yes. Number 1 team, got to get the Dominator.
I would assume so. Here, let me look through.
Yeah.
Yep, he did. Yep.
Okay, so he got he or she got the guy at the Dominator. And so
Steve Honeycutt. So.
That's right, Steve Honeycutt. And listen, as I look at this overlay, it says grind time. Shout out to Billy Musio. It's not a grind time podcast, but it is, because we're always grind timing, but it is the full-time fantasy podcast. So we love our buddy Billy. But listen, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, great season, won his 10K, but now he's panicked, he's terrified. He or she, they, I'll just say they are panicked and terrified. Keenan Allen out this week. How many people own Keenan Allen going into this, Jack? I think you got the numbers on that.
Yeah, in the World Championship, I believe he's the 2nd highest owned player overall. 17 teams, percent overall, and Tyreek Hill 16 teams at 7% as well. So both very highly owned, very high advance rate players coming into this competition. And I think, at least from what I see, just for the start, I think it accentuates the importance of, nailing the wide receivers right early on. Like, just, we like to think about late round sleepers, and he certainly does well in the later rounds, which we'll get to. But really, the building blocks of just getting those first couple picks right can have such a huge difference, and it gives you a lot of latitude later on to maybe miss or deal with injuries and things like that.
For sure. And so, speaking of injuries, like I said, Keenan Allen out this week. Tyreek Hill, ankle sprain, Jets defense. I think you and I have been talking about this on the show for weeks now, that this Dolphins receiving core is one that's probably not going to win people a lot of money because of the 3-week rate. It's not just the Jets. It's they have a multitude. I think all 3 matchups. I'm going to pull that up here while I'm kind of talking. They have 3 matchups where I think they had Baltimore, I think, is one of them. And so they just do not have a good strength of schedule. So to get 3 big time weeks out of these guys is going to be very, very difficult. The Jets, the Cowboys, the Ravens. Yeah. So, it's with an ankle sprain. Listen, Tyreek's incredible, and he's chasing a record. So listen, I'm not saying he's not going to try to go out and get that, but I think with these matchups, it's going to be tough. Because, like you said, in these big time tournaments, you got to have kind of some of these spike weeks, and that might be difficult. Ramondre Stevenson, injuries there. ETN still getting in the end zone, but maybe fading. But you look here, they start receiver heavy and still end up with a good running back core, right? Stevenson, you know, not going to be reliable, but Etienne, Kamara, Pacheco, like that's a nice little, you know, Chandler might start this week. I don't know if he still has Chandler on the team, but you know, he still ends up with some decent running backs.
Yeah, I think this is a good case, especially when it comes to the running back position. It's kind of like a relay race. So like instead of viewing it as running backs that are, you know, I'm going to start from the beginning and get to the end with the same star running backs. It's like passing the baton one from the next. There were times when Ramondre Stevenson was killing it. Same thing with Travis Etienne and Pacheco. Then you're moving in, and even down, you know, you obviously couldn't use Kamara for the first few games while he was suspended, but then comes on hot. And then down towards the bottom when it comes to some of his later running back picks. You mentioned Ty Chandler, but he's also got Gus Edwards and Zach Moss.
Yeah.
So at various times, he's just passing off running backs one to the next. And you know, between all of these running backs stringing together, you know, RB1 performances out of later draft picks.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And still, Njoku's got to be the number one tight end over the last 3 weeks. Guy's absolutely crushing it. And Justin Fields has that spike week ability here where he can go. They always wait like 10 weeks before they use him correctly every single year. They're finally getting around to using him correctly again. So he's got that spike week ability there. I would start him over even, you know, guys like Lamar Jackson. Obviously can't start Burrow. I'd start him over Lawrence. Can't start Herbert. I'd start him over Mahomes at this point. Like, it's just not happening for Mahomes this year. So, you know, Fields is looking good down the stretch here. And so he's got the tight end covered, the running backs, the quarterback, you know, the receivers have gotten him there. Thielen fading, you know, I don't know if he picked up anybody else. I don't know if, you know, Puka Nacua is on this roster at this point, but, you know, I think he's going to need to ride these running backs to the money because I don't know. Keenan Allen's out, obviously. Herbert's done for the year. So even when Allen comes back, you're still got, you know, what are you doing at quarterback there? And then Tyreek with the ankle, it's going to be, and Godwin might not even play this week either. He didn't, I don't think he practiced today. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a tough one.
One interesting thing, I think, just looking at the format and the success he's had through the regular season, you know, regardless of where you go from now, being one of 21 dominators is quite an accomplishment, and being the regular season winner, certainly an accomplishment. So if I'm looking at just kind of his approach to the draft, a lot of people would think that it's, you know, necessary with all of the injuries to be more conservative and be drafting your backup quarterback and a backup tight end, especially if you're not drafting like a top 3 stud. But I think one interesting thing that he does here is he's not picking the, you know, a top like a Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. He's not picking a Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, and yet he's kind of treating them like they are. And in one way, you're thinking, well, that's a very dangerous strategy. You know, what happens, all these injuries that occurred this year. But when I was looking at this draft board and kind of just thinking through the process, at no point in the early season was I thinking about Jake Browning being able to, you know, be a QB1 in the key weeks. So the very same chaos that makes the need for replacement quarterbacks and tight ends also, if you're active on the waiver wire, can present those opportunities that weren't otherwise there. So I think he is, by taking a little bit of a gamble in this initial draft and going skinny at the onesie positions, he actually is giving himself more shots on players like Gus Edwards and Zach Moss that end up being those key pivotal players that got him here.
Yeah, I think you can definitely. I like the idea of going skinny at the onesie at quarterback. That's usually what I did. I was taking, you know, the kind of the stud ones high, especially in the FFWC. Man, they felt like this was the only format you were able to get freaking Josh Allen in the 5th round. I mean, we got Josh Allen in the 5th round on a main event team. I don't think the team ended up getting through, but we ended up getting Allen in the 5th. Like, and so, you know, to be able to go slim onesie Fields, and then, you know, without it, it's not tight end premium, so you can get away with one quarterback, or sorry, one tight end, and Njoku ends up hitting, especially for the second half of the year. Flacco loves him. Like, it's just a guy that he's going to keep riding Njoku. So, Yeah, there's definitely some support there. And it just goes to show like the way you can build these teams. It allows you, right? Just like, hey, listen, I'm not going to go quarterback, and who knows? I mean, maybe we'll have Honeycutt on the podcast maybe next week or maybe at the end of the season. Pick their brain, like, hey, were you going to take another quarterback? Were you going to take another tight? And you just got sniped. Maybe you wanted Ferguson and he got sniped, or maybe you wanted one of these other players and got sniped. He's like, you know what? I'll take my 7th RB2. Like that's because that's a viable strategy. Now, look at this, Josh Downs in the freaking 20th round or whatever this is. That's freaking crazy.
And I've actually I picked up, or I just pulled up Steve's team here that he's starting for Week 15, at least the lineup that he has now. And I'm noticing on the bench he did have C.J. Stroud, so he picked him up along the way, which is a fantastic pickup and a great example of that availability. But yeah, he looks like he's shifting in order to cope with this by going pretty RB heavy and looking towards Kamara, ETN, Moss, in order to kind of support him now that he is losing out on Keenan Allen this week. So definitely shifting with the news, and looks like he's adapted throughout the season to whatever's come to him.
Yeah, dude, it's so crazy looking at some of these rosters. Just looking at some of these drafts. August 22nd, Cooper Kupp, 6th overall to Chad. Like, it's just the timing of some of these drafts, man, with the injuries and stuff like that. It's like no shot. I mean, you take and then Chubb. Like week 2, your season's over. It's a $2,000 draft. Now, granted, he could do 8 million of these, but it's like, man, oh man, imagine if you only had a couple teams. And I mean, listen, I've got plenty of teams with Chubb and Dobbins on it, so I can't. I don't feel bad at all for Chad. But it's just interesting to see how this stuff kind of works out. But
the other thing the one last thing that I thought of when I was kind of looking at the draft board and Steve's draft before we hopped on here is, I remember Keenan Allen at different parts of the summer going in the mid to late 3rd round. And I remember seeing Keenan just slowly climb up as people started to, warm to the idea of it. And I think it's a good example or case study in the idea that, if it's the right pick, it's the right pick, even at a higher price. There are some times where if somebody climbs up the board a bit, we get naturally hesitant to like, well, the ADP's risen, so I'm going to get out. But sometimes at this point in the draft, it doesn't matter if his price has been going up for the past 3 months. If it's the right pick, it's the right pick. And you don't necessarily need to shy off things just because a player's getting some hype or steaming up the boards. If there are those sound reasons that you're picking him for and you believe in those reasons, stick to your guns, I would say, if your process is sound. And I would assume that's what he was thinking with Keenan Allen, picking him ahead of people like Chris Olave or, Smith, even for the Eagles, who would typically go ahead of him. So this was kind of a bold pick that certainly paid off for him.
And Chad, I got back to Chad. He's probably loving. Oh my God, Devontae Smith, wide receiver, 16, middle of the 3rd, like loving that. Mm-hmm. And then you're also going to get the flip side of that coin though too. Right, people who were not on Keenan are going to be like, "Yep, see, here we are, money weeks." He's hurt. His quarterback's hurt. He's probably not going to win people money. He probably will not be the player that he was to get you there. But like, listen, if I have 10K in the bank already, I don't really care. So,
and that's the best thing about fantasy football is you can be right either way.
That's right.
Make the argument
or wrong either way. So,
right. Well.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, interesting stuff. So, good luck to Steve Honeycutt. Maybe we'll get him on the show here coming up soon and talk through a lot of those strategies. So yeah, let's talk about some of the kind of the players that kind of maybe a lot of the teams have, and we'll work through that. You were looking at a lot of stuff today, and what did you find out? Like, let's go through some of the high owned players, the low owned players, and just injured players now, and how it affects kind of the players that have high advance rates here.
Well, before the show, we were joking that like the winner is going to be the team that is able to field a complete lineup for 3 weeks straight. I started just looking at the injuries and how wide of an impact they have, not in the whole 600, but just in the 204 that have made it through. So we're talking, like we talked about before, 17 teams have Keenan Allen, another 16 with Tyreek Hill. That remains to be seen. 14 teams have Nico Collins, another 14 with Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, we'll see as a game time decision tomorrow, 13 teams. Justin Herbert out for the rest of the season. That impacts 12 teams. I had mid-stakes teams that my red versus blue 3 team, which I was very proud of for a good deal of the season, had Justin Herbert, and eventually picked up Josh Dobbs as my QB2, started him in a few spots, and thought that was going to be good for me. Ran out of money, had Herbert, Dobbs, now got nothing, even though the team has pushed through. So certainly been rough. Stroud with 12 teams here in the World Championship. Ramondre Stevenson, another 10, and Jonathan Taylor, 6 teams. So that's a lot of teams that just right off the bat have been impacted, and not in a minor way. These are the players that got them to this position and are now going to have to navigate the playoffs without waivers.
Right, exactly. And so that's the tough part, and that's where you're really looking at. Like a lot of times it gets down to this time of year, and again, this isn't a huge tournament at the end, only 204 teams, so you don't have to get crazy different or whatever. You just want to be consistently good throughout the whole course of the thing. But it still matters, like who you've got, who the other teams ahead of you have, and how you can kind of play off of them, for sure. And if people are wondering, like, hey, where can we get these numbers? I know Roy did a nice breakdown for sure of that. And you can also, like, if you go to let me actually share this again. I'll pull up the other. I'll pull this up here. So if you actually go to the team page and you go to championship standings, you can go down here to ownership, and there's an ownership tab right here in the middle of the page, and you click on that, and it pulls up. Where is it here? I already have it open. No, I don't have it open. Where the heck did it go? It's not working for me right now. But anyways, I'll pull it up some point during the show. But you can actually click on ownership, and it'll bring it up, and it'll show you like all these numbers of who's got how many teams have advanced through, which is really, really cool for everyone to have and to know and to find out, hey, how can I get different? How can I get unique? Maybe it breaks the tie of like a start sit or something like that. So
it not only shows ownership, but it also shows whether the players currently started for that upcoming week, which is really valuable.
Oh, wow. That's excellent.
If you are, further back in the pack and you're looking ahead, and there are, another 10 teams with players that you're deciding whether or not to start, maybe you get different and start somebody that's a little lower owned, so you've got a little bit more opportunity to get leverage and leapfrog the players ahead of you. It definitely adds that strategy to it. For sure.
So I just backed out of the page, went back in, clicked that ownership tab right here in the middle, and here it pulled up the players' percentage starting, percent starting and stuff like that. So you can just scroll through here and see, like, tiebreaker, Deebo Samuel, CeeDee Lamb, not as high owned as maybe I thought he would be, only 7% compared to a lot of the other players. And kind of go through there, and that makes maybe start sit decision. Oh God, the poor Justin Herbert people. There's 14 Herbert teams. So if you don't have Herbert, right, you're like, oh, good. I'm at an advantage there. So there's different ways to use this tool. Really, really awesome tool that they offer over there among their, it's a very toolsy site. It's got so much great stuff that everybody can use and should be using to kind of their advantage. And if you're not, you're definitely at a disadvantage. So yeah, it was interesting, kind of some of those numbers that you were talking about. Let's talk about the different positions here, and maybe let's go to injuries and see how you think that's going to affect. So you got, Tyreek's on 16 teams, Nico's on 14. Let's start with the injuries and see, like, is there any way to take advantage of that? Like, if you have some of these injuries, are you ruined? Like, how can we kind of maybe use that information to kind of, even if we don't have those injured players, how that's going to affect other people's lineups?
Sure. So, when I'm looking ahead, I've got a team. I think personally, one of my highest is in the 30s, and then the same. We've got a team that we co-own at 12. I like to look ahead and start to look at of the players ahead of me. Is there a high amount, a concentration of injured players that are unfortunately going to have to sit? That'll influence my lineup decisions by maybe do I need, if I'm already near the top, do I need to shoot for the moon with that really high upside kind of wild card play, or do I want more consistent performance because I feel like I'll be able to move ahead based upon the current margin? Whereas if I'm further back and maybe I have some of those players that are injured, I'm going to start, looking for the more contrarian plays, looking for, it's less than the ownership and it's more the starting and looking and seeing who are the players that I have that, I'm not going to tell anyone to play Trey Sermon over, Travis Etienne or something to get different. But if you've got a tiebreaker, if you got a close decision and one is significant starting, at a greater margin than the other, especially when you're at the back of the pack, it's a good way now in week 15 when there's still time to start accruing points in a different way, which, if you're starting, if somebody's ahead of you and you're relying on the same player, you're kind of locked into that position. So you've got to find some way to get different.
Yeah. And it's such I can't overstate how important that is. You obviously did very well last year. I know a lot of people that have done well in other tournaments, and they use this type of information of who other people are going to start and play to affect their lineup, and you can catapult people. Obviously, the players still need to score, but you can catapult people. Like I know a group of friends that won another tournament, and they knew last year they knew everyone was going to be starting Zonovan Knight last season because he was the hot player, and everybody had him because you could only pick him up during the league playoffs. And he was going to start that week for the Jets, and they had him. But you know what? If we're behind. Like if you're in 180th place right now in this tournament and you're behind, you don't want to start who everyone else is going to be starting. You want to, and they ended up starting Zay Jones instead. Now, Zay Jones scores 3 touchdowns week 15. Like the players still need to perform, but that is kind of something that you can use these tools to your advantage to try to, again, you don't want to get crazy, right? Start guys that aren't even going to freaking play, but you still want to get a little bit different. So
it's kind of positioning yourself to take advantage of luck. Like the fact that Zay Jones gets 3 touchdowns is luck, but he needs to be in your starting lineup in order for you to take advantage of that. And if you're starting the person that 3 people ahead of you have, and you all get 3 touchdowns, you're not putting yourself in the position to really capitalize on those, kind of tail events that we don't see as likely at the time, but $150,000 later, you're glad you got different.
Yeah. And maybe some again, I don't have the numbers right in front of me this second, but so maybe you've got a couple of good running backs, and Antonio Gibson this week is maybe he's the starter, and you know what, nobody's got Antonio Gibson, but maybe he's like Antonio Gibson and maybe Javonte Williams, right? Maybe you have both of them, and you're you know what, Javonte will probably score a little bit more, but way more people have Javonte Williams. So I'm going to start Gibson, and he could go off. Right? It's like a Zay Jones play. He's okay, but you could tell yourself a story, and then all of a sudden, bang, he goes off, and no one's starting him, and you leapfrog 100 teams. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's that big. Like you said, the difference between 1 and 204 right now is 36 points. I mean, that's a guy has a 2-3 touchdown game. You leapfrog everybody, and you're up to the top. So very important stuff, guys, to not just get stuck in your, hey, I'm going to start the guy that got me there. It doesn't, listen, that's over now. You start the guy that you want, the guy that didn't get you there, because that guy got everybody there. You know what I mean? So start the guys that you think no one else is going to start that has the ability to kind of get you through. So
it's interesting you said about, the guys that didn't get you there. I was looking at the quarterbacks, and if you take a look, not at the starting, but just in the rostership ownership in the World Championship right now, I believe it was 12th and 13th highest owned quarterbacks. So certainly not up there are Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, which is just mind-boggling. And I'm not entirely sure how that works out, but I could certainly see that with Lamar, where it's, there were stretches in the season where he was getting 15 points. But then last week turns around and gets 38 points. So it's if there is a quarterback that could string together 3 weeks of 30-plus point performances and take this all away, you might have been seeing Lamar as kind of unreliable for a good chunk of the year, but all you've got to do is string together 3 weeks. And so it's kind of those interesting leverage plays like that, you may be sitting. I've got a Lamar team that's closer to the back, closer to 204 than it is to 1. But I'm optimistic just because of the opportunity to leapfrog teams. And really, you got to remember, and what I try to remind myself, this is a whole nother contest. Like, we act like it's the same, but we just did a 14-week contest to determine who gets to play in this 3-week contest. So everybody is live at this point, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, no. And Josh Allen's the opposite of what I was saying. Like, Josh Allen got you there, but nobody else has him. Now that's you got to look at these numbers, guys, because you might think, oh, I'm going to get different. I'm going to start a different quarterback because Allen got everybody there. Allen's, like you said, he's the 14th owned quarterback in the whole thing. That's a guy that you want to start because not a lot of people have him, and he's the number 1 quarterback with massive upside. It's going to be a shootout with the Cowboys this week. Josh Allen always shows up. So that's kind of the opposite of what I was saying, but it's still a very, very great point. Some high owned players here going into this. The highest owned players are Puka Nacua, 21 teams. Naturally, again, a guy that you were able to get off waivers or maybe draft with your last pick. Those guys are going to be very high owned here because they're going to help teams get through. Keenan Allen not playing this week, second highest owned player, 17 teams. Tyreek, 16 teams, and then Zach Charbonnet at 14 teams and 6%. What are you reading out of these highest owned players here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, a lot of you might be thinking, well, what do I do with some of this information? And to me, that's at least signal that the field's wide open. Like, Charbonnet is still going to have a role if he's out there and healthy, but Ken Walker's back, and the Seattle offense has kind of changed a bit over the last few games. He certainly doesn't have the role that I think got people there. Keenan Allen, Tyreek, all these players, the landscape has shifted. So I think even when you make it through, sometimes people are a little down on the team and how well it's going to do, and do I really have a shot? I think the numbers are saying you absolutely do. One interesting bit that I think stood out to me, there were some, let me pull up for tight ends, for example. Trey McBride, there are only 6 teams with Trey McBride, despite the season he had, which tells me that a lot of the Trey McBride owners, for whatever reason, had teams that, he just was not enough to move the needle, or he came too late in the season, whatever the case may be. Or what actually might be likely is this might be like a lot of Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, or teams that picked up Trey McBride as their tight end too, or even still have a viable tight end. And so I think there is a great example. There are very few Trey McBride teams in the World Championship overall, and yet is going to be pretty much a locked-in tight end 5 or better any given week. So it may feel strange when you're looking at maybe higher rostered tight ends that might traditionally have more name value versus somebody new. And how could I possibly start some upstart tight end over a more established tight end when all the money's coming down? But here, I think it's not only just taking advantage of the recent trend and the production he's had this season, but the fact that you have a move that only 6 teams can make in this entire contest, which really gives you a lot of upside opportunity to get different and score points when other people aren't scoring.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what you want to do. Like, because if you ask somebody, hey, would you rather have 30 points from Keenan Allen, or would you rather have 30 points from Trey McBride? Like, oh, it's 30 points. It's not, because Keenan Allen is the second highest owned player in the tournament. Everyone's got him, especially the top teams, and nobody has Trey McBride. So that 30 points is going to leapfrog you above the other teams that don't have Trey McBride. or that don't get 30 points from their tight end. You know what I mean? So it's just, yes, it's a perfect example of using the tools, studying who's starting who. Now listen, if you've got Trey McBride, however many teams you said had him, not very many, you're probably starting him because he's having a great season. Now he does have a tough matchup this week. The Niners are fifth against the tight end position, fifth toughest. So, you could see that being an issue there. But this, again, probably going to end up being a shootout for Arizona because they're going to have to throw to keep up. Kyler's going to be running all over the place, making plays. Hopefully for our FFWC lives, he'll be doing stuff like that. But
another interesting player, though, in that same vein is Josh Palmer coming off of IR without Keenan Allen, without Mike Williams. There's apparently something called Quentin Johnston that'll be out on the field, but I'm not sure if you could call it playing. So even if we're talking about North Dakota State's, the pride of North Dakota State, Easton Stick, the ball needs to go somewhere. And, that Josh Palmer could reasonably be a flex play that you're looking at, that you're trying to decide, is it worth it? Do I really want to play in this garbage game? Do I really want to put my $150,000 in the hands of the Chargers? Well, there are only 7 teams that have Josh Palmer at this point in the entire tournament, 3%. So, again, when you're looking to differentiate yourself from a flex perspective, that's an easy way if you've got a close matchup, kind of that last spot that you're trying to figure out how to get different. That's it. Well, apparently Stick is going to surprise me, but he does have rushing upside.
Yeah.
He does have rushing upside from his collegiate profile, and was the successor to Carson Wentz, who certainly was good in college as well. So the opportunity to prepare and actually have the full week to game plan and kind of set up plays that are more towards his skill set, he absolutely could surprise people. And if he does, and if you play a little differently, Josh Palmer and a very low-owned Josh Palmer at that is exactly kind of the vehicle to take advantage of that surprise.
Yeah, no, for sure. And man, I mean, it's sick to think about. You get this far and you're like, my God, I got to start Josh Palmer, with Easton Stick at quarterback, coming off a bye injury, injured for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But it's those type of plays that sometimes you get forced into, right? You'd never do that with a nice, full, healthy roster, but Keenan Allen, there's a bunch of other guys we're waiting on, Marquise Brown, are these guys going to play? And sometimes you force, listen, the only guy I have left is Josh Palmer. So let's cross our fingers and lock into that. A couple lesser known players, like we were talking about with the team earlier, that's number 1 overall heading into this thing. Tyreek high owned, Keenan Allen high owned, but Justin Fields low owned. Justin Fields only six teams. Bijan on only 6 teams. I mean, listen, Bijan Robinson low owned, 6 teams, 2%. You got to of course, you got to put JSN in there. 6 teams, 2%. I mean, his matchups the next 3 weeks, folks, unbelievable. He's got the number 2 strength of schedule: Carolina, Indy, Chicago, down the stretch here. That might not mean anything to you, but it's all green on my spreadsheet, and we're talking second in the league as far as strength of schedule is concerned. So you could see Bijan cooking in those games at 6 teams. I mean, that's so sweet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in the spirit of injuries, you've got Achane popping up with potential turf toe or something like that, at least for this particular week. Jeff Wilson, you haven't heard from in a while, you haven't had to think about, but there are 6 teams, 2% of the tournament that has Jeff Wilson. So the opportunity to have a Miami RB2, even in a tough situation, not only do you get somebody who's getting the volume and you're able to do it kind of cheaply off the waiver wire or one of those lower draft picks, but to be able to do it and get leverage on the field is kind of icing on the cake.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I'm like, we talk all the time, and I got all these different teams. Obviously, it's dwindled down now, but every single piece of news, every single injury, I'm always thinking like, okay, how does that help me somewhere, anywhere? Does it help me here? Can I take advantage of it here? It's harder now because there's no waivers. You obviously can't do trading, but like, okay, you've got an injury here or a low-owned player here. How can I, take care of that? How does that help me over here? The Jeff Wilson thing is what I'm thinking of, like the Dolphins. That's why I've always said all year to everybody, never drop a running back ever. Never, ever drop them, because they're always an injury away from being the guy, and always be picking them up. So it's like, listen, you've got Raheem Mostert. Awesome. He's been the RB2 all year. He's been incredible. He's played all year. But he started limping on Monday Night Football after the first play of the game. And he was limping through the whole game. You could see him maybe taking a back seat this week, or you could see him maybe not even playing. I mean, it's crazy to think about. I haven't heard that, obviously, but like, now you're a Jeff Wilson is startable. Now, there's different situations like that you have to be prepared to take advantage of, for sure. Yeah. So also lesser owned player here, 6 teams. And you're probably all 6 teams. JSN here in the championship rounds, a guy with the schedule looking good. Hopefully we get Gino back this week for his sake. What do you think about JSN here now that we're finally in the big money weeks?
I think that God himself decided to flex the Seattle Seahawks game from Sunday to Monday so that Geno Smith could have one more day to heal up that groin, so that he could get the ball back out to JSN. Thank you for letting me fulfill my contractual obligation towards JSN. But, as much as it is a bit, I think we've talked about it every single time, but that Seattle Seahawks wide receiver schedule for the next 3 weeks and the fact that he's a low-owned player, I'm going to go down with this ship. So either you're going to be bringing me back on for the 150K, and I can tell you how JSN got me there, or I'm going to be bringing on back on this show talking about what a great value JSN is going to be next year's drafts, because he disappointed people. One way or the other, we'll get him back in the show.
Yeah, no, we're definitely we're fired up for him. We've been talking about him probably more than any podcast in America in the history of the world. But listen, everything you said is true. I'm looking right now, week 17. I want to know, you're talking about Monday night. I wish you weren't a freaking 12-hour drive away, because I feel like we'd have to get together. The final game of the season for fantasy is Monday night, Packers Vikings. Oh God, that brings back horrible memories of me losing out a ton of money on an Aaron Jones long touchdown run a couple of years back. I think it was Packers Vikings actually for that game, but
that sounds right.
That's right. But listen, we got a Packer receiver that we're relying on a bunch. So maybe we'll get together. Maybe we'll meet. What's halfway? Trenton, New Jersey, or something? There's probably something.
There's no way you can get me to come back to New Jersey. Not even for JSN.
For a Jaden Reed
Yeah. One other player that is certainly lesser owned, and I think is actually one that people could be in a position to be making a lineup decision. It's Ty Chandler. With Alexander Madison going down with the ankle, there are 9 teams, 4% of the teams that made it, that have Ty Chandler. And this, obviously with all of the injuries that are happening, maybe this is your fill-in RB2, but even more likely, because he's kind of a icing on the cake sort of player, this could be a flex that you're maybe going back and forth between a 5th wide receiver, or, obviously I'm talking about my builds, a 5th wide receiver, but one of your flexes, be it a wide receiver or Ty Chandler. I think the fact that there are fewer teams that have him, he kind of snuck in for a lot of people, hasn't really been pulling teams through, gives him the opportunity to let you get different in a way that maybe isn't quite as risky. It's a way that you can feel good about, that he's the starter going into the role. He might have, they might need to rely on him, especially now that they're off of Dobbs. And so there's not going to be as much QB running anymore. You can certainly paint yourself a picture for Ty Chandler, and stranger things have happened.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Ty Chandler has that opportunity to be able to be that guy for teams that are really struggling right now at that position with injuries and stuff like that. For sure. Yeah. And he's a guy that you're excited, like, please, let me get in my starting lineup here. There's got to be, with all the flex positions you could have, a way to flex him in at the very least. But Getting to the quarterbacks here, it's interesting. I've got 3 teams total through here to this round, and I've got Jalen Hurts on 2 of them, and he's the highest owned quarterback, but still only at 6%. It's crazy how how the percentages are. You would think that there would be higher for certain players. I was bitching about Patrick Mahomes on Twitter this week about how, listen, no one's talking about it, but he stinks this year. And Snake was like, hey, listen, I told you shouldn't be drafting Patrick Mahomes. He's on more teams than Josh Allen is in this championship round. So I don't know what to tell you. Now, none of my Mahomes teams made it through, but to only have 8 teams with Patrick Mahomes on it is super interesting. Jalen Hurts obviously had a fine year, but even MVP, even fake MVP candidate Brock Purdy is on 10 teams and 4%. But yeah, so we'll see. How do you attack the quarterback position? Obviously, were you one of those guys taking a QB early, that elite QB, or were you guys kind of flexing the Jordan Love, Brock Purdy tier?
I more often than not, I never want to be the first to take a quarterback, and I don't even want to be the second to take a quarterback. So like you were talking about a lot of the elite 3 or 4, if you wanted to include Lamar, especially in the early spots where there's a reasonable chance of them falling to 5, late 4, early 5. That would be, I would take whoever's left if I was going to go elite QB. And then beyond that, unfortunately, some Justin Herbert. And then after that, late round QB, just grab 2 or 3 and make it work. For us, I know that we started seasons with like Daniel Jones and Geno Smith and kind of worked our way into CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray. So at least for me, I would have kind of signposts throughout the draft. It's, do I have an opportunity to get an elite quarterback at a discount? No. Then I'm going to go to the kind of bottom of this next tier. And if not, then I'm going to push it and wait till, the difference between the 14th, 15th, 16th, and the 18th, 19th, 20th QB drafted, not that great. And they might not have functioning legs at this point in the season, given how things are going. So
that's right.
Yeah, kind of those different off ramps, deciding where to go, which, I think too, I was listening to you talk about the percentages, and when I saw the ownership too, and compared them to other tournaments and contests, a lot of other contests seem to be much more concentrated on certain players. And I think part of that, we've got a really unique and competitive set of drafters here at the FFWC. People certainly do stack, but you're not going to see near as many people force stacking. A lot of the high ownership comes not even from stacking, but from getting locked into ADP. So it's not necessarily this quarterback that's advancing you. It's because Tyreek Hill was at this point, and these were the quarterbacks being drafted on other sites. Whereas here, there's a lot of willingness to kind of buck the trends or buck ADP and get out of that and draft some really unique teams. Like one of the team that we have that's doing particularly well, I think, is the only team in the entire tournament, not even the championship round, that had Keenan Allen and Amon-Ra St. Brown, because they typically came at opposite sides of the board. And so you have players that are willing to kind of draft out of order at the time and make some really unique combinations, which also kind of spreads out that ownership and makes it less consolidated, which, again, I think is just a testament to the drafters here at the FFWC. A lot of really sharp competitors. And so it's a really interesting field to have this kind of small of a race, 206 teams. It's not one of these massive, Millie Maker style, I'll throw it in, but no realistic expectation. But it's also fierce competition among that 204.
For sure. And another thing about the family of FFWC players is they're very old school, right? Like you're talking about bucking the trend, but they're also very like, listen, when has taking quarterback high ever been a good idea? Like we stopped doing that 20 years ago. Like, why are we starting up now? And so you see in these tournaments, they're just going, they didn't get up higher than this year. Some of these other sites, some of these other leagues, second round, third round, fourth, freaking underdog, the 8 billion drafts over there people are doing, they're going at the 1-2 turn. Like, so yeah, they people in this, on this site and this family of drafters, man, they stood their ground, and you're able to get quarterbacks later on. And that's why I think some of the advance rates and the percentage ownerships kind of changed because of like where people were drafting them and stuff like that. So it's super interesting and super cool. And yeah, a lot, like you said, kudos to a lot of the drafters here, just having that conviction to do what they think is right and buck the trends of kind of what everything else is doing. So super, super interesting stuff here. And to kind of go back to the quarterback position too, real quick, and then we'll get out of here and, kind of go with the guys that got you there. CJ Stroud's a perfect example. Like, he's a guy that we thought 3 weeks ago might be our key to 150K, and just he got injured. Nico Collins gets injured. Tank Dell gets injured. Like, even if Stroud was fully healthy this week, I don't think we would start him over Kyler Murray because of the injuries to other players and maybe matchups and stuff. Like, sometimes you got to get off of those guys and go with the player who you think is going to score the most points this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Not getting I feel like the natural tendency is to almost get even more conservative in these final 3 weeks. I don't want to risk it. This is when all the money is.
That's right.
And you actually kind of have to fight that impulse. Like, I think one of the higher advance rate quarterbacks for this entire contest is Jake Browning. And that is a testament to owners being either forced out of sheer desperation or out of some conviction to start a lesser known quarterback in a good opportunity, and has certainly paid off in the past 2 weeks with his performance. And, Jake Browning's not going to be the only Jake Browning. So there are going to be other players at the quarterback position or elsewhere that, maybe you're itching. There's something in the back of your mind. You read something. There's a stat. There's something that just sticks out. And, choosing to go with that player over the established name or something like that, even if Keenan Allen would have played.
Right.
It's a terrible matchup. Sticking to just kind of the high draft capital players that you got there, sure, it's going to pay off a lot of times, but it needs to pay off this time in these 3 weeks in order to be worth it all. So encourage everybody to look through the ownership tool, all of the awesome tools that they provide here at the FFWC, and really use it to get the edge, use it to really think through your lineups, not just in terms of who's the best on my team and who has the highest projection, but in the context of where I am in the race and the upside that they present. What can this do for me? It's the great thing about the game we play is that there is no shortage of things to analyze or consider when we're making these decisions.
The other thing too is Keenan Allen's such a great example of this because especially if you have some depth where you can put in a guy that you're fairly confident, like, okay, I'll put in this guy and maybe he's got some juice or some points to him this week, and it's not absolutely going to kill me. But he was a perfect example of a guy that, like, I have a 5K where I'm just like, man, what am I, he was on my bench right now, setting my lineup this week. He was on my bench for tomorrow. And as I was working through it, but it's just like, now it gets you off because you don't want to make that mistake of, man, guys, take the name off of the board. It's all about points and percentages, right? It's about like, who's going to get me the most points. That's the lowest percentage played. And you got to play that, like that give and take game. Obviously you don't want to get too crazy, but the names don't matter anymore. It's about that type of play where, again, it's not about just the points, because if you got the guy that scores 30 points and everyone else has him too, it doesn't really help you, especially if you start this tournament in 80th place, right? If you're in the top 10, it's different. You're protecting a lead. You've got the guys. It can, or maybe week 2, week 3 of this tournament, you're protecting a lead. Fine. But if you're trying to gain, like we're at 12th, if you're trying to catch us, you're not going to do it with the players that we have, because we have them too.
Right.
You got to get different. So I think it's super interesting. There were guys like, hey, do I start Maybe like Odell Beckham's an example. Great matchup against the Jaguars this week. He's kind of coming out. When I've started him over Keenan Allen, like, no, I got to start Keenan. But now I've got the excuse. Keenan Allen's gone.
Yeah.
I'm going to roll with a guy like Odell Beckham, cross my fingers, a Deontay Johnson, God forbid I say Gabe Davis. Listen, he's due for points this week, right? Actual points, 0 points, 0 points, 0. Time for points. He freaking stinks, though. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got lineups where I'm itching like a Trey Palmer. He's been sitting on my bench all year.
That's right. With Godwin. Yeah.
With Godwin starting to go down, and he showed some potential. Maybe that's a way as the second flex to get a little creative. Chase Brown, I picked up all over as showing some flash. It certainly has shown just about as much as Keaton Mitchell has, and yet we don't treat him that way. So, one of the established facts of fantasy football is that Joe Mixon is dust. Well, if you believe that,
will we ever miss
have some strength of conviction?
Will we ever miss a game? These guys that are dust never get hurt. They just hang around. Like, come on.
It's not. There isn't actually a person named Joe Mixon. It's just a series of like actors that they string together, people off the street that look like Joe Mixon, like Saddam Hussein used to do with all the body doubles.
He's got body triples. It's like Adolf Hitler. It wasn't actually him. It was a body double.
That's why the talent though is just average, because it's just literally a replaceable player.
Just some random dude.
One of these days, Chase Brown. So
one of these days. Is it Demario Douglas week? Is it Noah Brown week? Like, these are the guys that listen, Keenan Allen gave you an excuse, guys. You got Keenan Allen. They gave you an excuse to pop one of these guys in and go with the instinct that you already had from the beginning.
It's going to be one of them. Nobody thought it was going to be Jerick McKinnon
or Zay Jones last year. Yeah.
Until it was Jerick McKinnon and Zay Jones last year. So, at this point, all those kind of decisions that I can't possibly do that. Go ahead, take a little risk, live a little bit, and you can blame it on us when it doesn't go bad. It goes poorly.
I was just gonna say, like, we're telling all these, start these random 40, and then meanwhile we're sitting in 12th place, starting to talk the whole way through.
No, I'm sticking with the brand. I think I'm going to get a little weird with a few teams on some conviction plays that I have.
Do it.
Certainly not across the board. You don't want to do it overboard or something like that. But, I picked up some players because I saw something in them. And there's a certain point in sticking with your convictions. And it's like if you're not willing to start the players that you had a conviction to grab and now have an opportunity to play because maybe an injury has created an opening, then why are you playing? Why don't you just, give your teams to whoever does your rankings?
Bingo. So. No, I completely agree with that. And listen, I hope we win, but if we don't win, I hope we're going to have the winner on the show and maybe some of the top 5 guys and gals. And I hope that they come on the show and say, hey, listen, you encouraged me to start my obscure wide receiver 4, and it helped me win $100,000. And I'll just have you buy us drinks when we see you in Vegas next season. So
that will help overcome all of the hate mail from me. I could have had $150,000 if you didn't tell me to start.
Well, good news is Keenan Allen's out. So, and we have Keenan Allen too. It's not even like I'm happy about it, but I'm kind of happy about it. All right, guys, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We went an hour here. Good stuff. Good luck this week, everybody. Setting those lineups. Hey, Thursday night game, 3 Saturday games, Sunday, Monday, no bye weeks, a beautiful week of football. Super excited. And again, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being with me, Jack. And we will see everybody next week.